Okay.
So now.
And we are live.
Hello.
Hi, friends.
This is going to be a good one, according to me.
According to Shelsea Ochoa, Shelsea Shochoa Ochoa.
You know, my last name means wolf.
And what?
Basque.
You know what it means 8 in Spanish?
It means 8 up. What does your name mean?
I have no idea.
Probably something to do with corn.
Okay.
So, here we are. We're going to talk about question of the week. And we've got 5 guests coming in today, which is going to be awesome. So, welcome to Soul Story Streaming. Danny, what's the question of the week?
The question of the week is, who do you turn to feedback for and why? Right?
You worded that really weird.
Did I get that right?
Who do you turn to for feedback?
Who do you turn to feedback for?
I mean, I guess.
Lauren says, hi, friends.
Hey.
Lauren is going to be interviewed soon. So, hi, Lauren. And Mahmoud is on. And he sent a really sweet message about how supportive Soul Stories is. And he stays up till 3 a.m. in Egypt to watch this.
Oh, that's so cool.
Every Thursday.
Gosh.
But yeah, isn't that awesome?
I wonder what his life is like in Egypt.
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah. Like, do you live in the big city, or do you live kind of on the outskirts or in the suburbs? Or
have you been to Egypt?
No.
Yeah, I want to go.
Me too.
All right, so
I'm gonna go to Giza.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It'd be amazing.
What were some responses to our question of the week?
So, who do you turn to for feedback and why? Amber said that she turns to her mom, that her mom is very wise and that she always has her best interest at heart, even if the feedback is sometimes hard to hear. And that is very important. You got to have someone that's going to give it to you straight.
Yeah, it has to be hard to hear.
Yeah.
At some point for it to actually count. Yeah.
You know, you saying that actually makes me think about positive feedback too. And I've been thinking about this question all week, but I have not considered the fact that
you don't like taking
positive feedback is part of getting feedback. Fuck that. Yeah, receiving who would I really turn to and really trust that when they tell me a piece of positive feedback, it's true?
Oh, that's a really good, interesting point.
I can't believe I'm just now thinking of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I don't know for myself.
And often it can be harder to trust positive feedback than it is to trust negative feedback.
Totally.
Because people when they're giving you negative feedback. I mean, I guess that's not true, because sometimes negative feedback is just a projection onto you.
Sure.
It's not actually what you need to change.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's a big part of what this conversation is not all feedback is good feedback or the right feedback for you.
Right.
We all have this idea of I feel like I always hear the expression, I'm open to any and all feedback. And that is not usually true.
No.
Because you don't want to take, first of all, you're going to get contradicting feedback throughout your life.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're going to have to decide. But, I wish I could remember exactly what the Brene Brown quote is. But
yeah, she goes deep into this.
Yeah. What is it that she says about if you're not in the arena?
Yeah, I feel like that's also kind of off of a Teddy Roosevelt quote as well or something. But yeah, it's something about basically what she's saying is only take feedback from people who are in the arena with you, not the people in the stands.
Yeah. It's really easy to have an opinion about someone when you have no idea what it's like to do the thing that they're doing.
Yeah. Except going off that, I could be totally wrong about quoting Brene Brown on this. if people from an outside view are very good feedback sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
I was just thinking about this. There's this person in this group that gives really harsh feedback that I'm in, and always like very direct. And it always seems like they don't know the background of what I'm doing with this feedback, but I often feel like that feedback is so effective for me.
Interesting. Even though they don't understand the context.
Because if they don't understand the context, I'm not communicating it well enough.
Exactly. And so sometimes, like, I feel like in that case, the feedback that you're getting might not necessarily be like that their suggestion is a good suggestion, but it's at least giving you a different kind of feedback, which is like, this is how it's being perceived.
Right. And the people around me know all of the context. So their feedback is very specific to my growth in one area.
Yeah.
But if I can't communicate the soul stories concept widely, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mahmoud says it's 3 a.m. He lives in Giza.
Oh, cool.
And we should visit after this is all safe.
Let's go.
That could be our
that'd be so fun.
First Ecuador and then Egypt.
Oh my God.
That would be fucking awesome.
I love Giza because it's like this perfect blend of like something very, very old and very, very modern.
Oh yeah.
I've seen like super modern pictures of Giza too.
Ooh.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited about that. This person Jasmine wrote, it really depends on who I turn to for feedback, but my best friend, Anna Zenova, for most stuff, because she's the smartest person I know. That's really cool.
I have thoughts on that.
What are your thoughts?
That sometimes if you only turn to select people for feedback, you might only be getting the feedback that you want to get.
Yeah.
Not that that's a bad thing. I think I go to you for most feedback.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the way that we structured the question is kind of like name a person.
Yeah, that's true.
But Anna Zenova is a fascinating person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like grew up around her. And
is she the one who answered it or the one who
it was answered about?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And now she's just like a badass, super independent musician who like has all these music videos and stuff that are all super unique. And I feel like she was kind of like an awkward kid, and that really worked out in her favor in her adulthood.
Really?
And I don't think she'd be offended by me saying that. I think it's just because I think that a lot of people grow up and slowly shed the parts about themselves that don't fit in with the group, like their class or whoever they're growing up around. And so then they like shed all the unique parts about themselves in order to kind of fit within the group.
Yeah.
But some people aren't very good at that, and then they end up being really awesome, unique people.
Yeah. That's cool. Do you think Bjork?
Oh my God. Well, I think Bjork spent a lot of time alone.
She had to, right?
Yeah.
There's no way she could have fit in.
Well, also, I think that like in Scandinavia, there's a lot of room to be weird.
Oh yeah.
Like I think that Bjork is weirder to us than she is to other Icelandic people.
Man.
But I mean, obviously she's still weird.
What a dream to be surrounded by like a culture that embraces weird.
Yeah, like Danish art is freaking crazy.
Really?
There's a lot of weird stuff because there's a lot of funding behind the public arts in Denmark as well. So there are legitimately people in Denmark that are like full-time artists because the government pays them to be artists.
Oh my God.
Which like, I guess happens sometimes here, but.
Any Denver artist watching this is just like drooling over that.
Yeah, just a plane ticket to Denmark.
Yeah. Oh. Feel free, if you're just joining us, to respond to our question of the week, which is what, Shelsea Shochoa?
The question of the week is, who do you turn to for feedback and why? And in about 5 minutes, we're going to have Julia Munson on, which I'm very excited about. She's going to talk to us for 10 minutes. We've got 5 guests coming on, and they're each going to talk for 10 minutes.
Awesome. Who are our guests tonight?
First, we've got Julia, who is a therapist and a badass and has taught me a lot. I've been in
entrepreneur too.
entrepreneur. We got Lauren, food genius extraordinaire, knows a lot about sustainability. We've got Brett Randell.
Brett Randell.
Tell us about Brett Randell.
Brett Randell is a writer, musician, and entrepreneur. And he's a good friend of ours. And he just has a very good perspective on the world. It seems very grounded to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I actually I go to him for feedback, like I go to you for feedback, but I'm often terrified of going to him for feedback.
Because he's very straight up.
Yeah, he'll tell me it very precisely and very real. And if I'm not ready for real, I won't bring it.
Yeah.
Like if I need like a little bit of sugarcoating, I won't go to Brett. But no, he's very positive in his directness.
He's also very motivated.
Yeah, he's super disciplined.
Yeah. So that makes me really wonder about his process of soliciting feedback. Because I feel like he's like very achievement oriented.
Yeah.
So he probably needs a lot of feedback.
Yeah. I think this is why he's excited about this topic.
Yeah.
Who else do we have on?
We have Jaser, who does like development for nonprofits and also has lived with us at the Orbis House, which is where Danny and I used to live. And so I'm really curious to see if he has any comments on collective housing and what it's been like in the quarantine era to have like 6 or 7 roommates.
Oh, that's interesting. And the feedback that happens within that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
And then we're going to have Quinn. And Quinn is, do you know, what's Quinn's full name?
Kevin Quinn Marchman.
He's a performance artist and does a lot of great stuff, Black Actors Guild. And he was just online doing a Midsummer Night's Dream reading with TCPA. I don't know if it was on We Are Denver.
Oh, it was just on.
Yeah, but it was on, yeah. But he's very involved, I think, with We Are Denver as well.
Yeah, I think that's mostly Ryan Flu's thing, but he's definitely involved.
So he does a lot of collaborating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of different kinds of perspectives on feedback.
Yeah, I'm excited. These are all people I would turn to and be like, can you give me feedback on this thing? Which is nice to be able to have this discussion with them.
Yeah. I'm really curious to know how people feel about unsolicited feedback as well. Like, how do you know when you're open to feedback? And then how can you tell if feedback is actually when I reject feedback, I feel like I always have to double check. Is this like my ego that I don't want to hear something that's true and I really need to hear it?
Yeah.
Or is this truly that person's wrong?
Yeah. Brenton says, I actually hear Brett is quite the slacker. Well, sorry, Brett. Trash talk.
But maybe that's a compliment in certain ways. Also
that Brett Randell is always a 2-name individual.
That's true.
Yeah.
Brett's too short of a name to just be Brett.
And Brett says, that's why I'm doing this. Don't have to leave the couch. Sue Yancey Creer says, I go to my husband for feedback because he has my best interest at heart and is straightforward. Best interest at heart. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, that's also what Amber said about her mother.
Oh, she said best
That's
interest?
specific phrasing, best interest at heart.
Huh.
I wonder if, for her, for Sue, does the feedback go both ways, or is it more one-sided or the other?
Oh,
sorry to interrupt you, but also with husbands and wives and life partner people, it's a huge amount of collective decision making.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey. Wow, it's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I love your glasses.
Thank you. It's so good to see both of you. Thanks for this invitation.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. So thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Julia Munson. Julia, do you want to say a sentence or two about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'd love to. I am a therapist and a coach, and relationships have been my jam, whether it's personal relationships, friendships, working with couples, working with teams, but basically how to build a world where we have conscious relationships. And I know that that's part of the, intention behind Soul Stories. So I've been a big fan of y'all for a long time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're so glad that you're here. Do you have, when we first kind of posed this question to you about receiving feedback, did you have any first primary thoughts?
Well, my first thought was, whoa, that's a big topic. 10 minutes. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just got, it's nuanced. It's got all these layers to it. So, there's lots of ways we could go with feedback, whether it's, drilling down to what is feedback and our relationship to feedback. So, and how to give and receive feedback really well. So it's a big topic, but it's an important one. So I appreciate you all starting that conversation.
Yeah. Who do you turn to specifically for feedback, Julia?
So who I turn to is my husband, because he knows me, warts and all. And I can count on him to be honest and loving. And I also have a learning community I'm part of. I've been part of this group we're going on 8 years together now. And our commitment is to support each other to keep expanding. So feedback is just an integral part of the process of being together. So I can turn to them at any time.
Whoa. 8 years with like the same group of people. I feel like you guys really get to know each other very well.
We know each other really well. And, I have your questions right here.
Yeah.
I came prepared.
Nice.
So one of the questions that I think is most important is actually, what should everyone ask themselves? So I'm kind of jumping ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
But the reason I want to actually mention that early is because it's the difference between content and context. And so, you can get feedback about lots of things. Like I could get feedback about my coaching. I could get feedback about my cooking. I could get feedback about how I handled a conversation. You can get feedback about anything and everything, but the context is really important. And so what I mean by that is the question that I've been living into for quite a while now is, am I more interested in growing, or am I more interested in being right?
Oh.
Am I more interested in learning, or am I more interested in having my ego soothed?
And how do you differentiate?
Well, if I'm interested in my ego being soothed, then I only want feedback that is stellar. that says I'm the greatest, So if I'm really interested in learning, I'm available for all sorts of feedback that could be an appreciation, but it also could be, a time where I made somebody mad and I did something that probably was not one of my best moments. Like it's more part of my shadow.
Well, so let's say that you get a piece of feedback that your first instinct is that you don't agree with the feedback. How do you go from there? How do you find out if it is your ego or if it is like just truly like not a good fit of feedback? And then how do you respond to the person?
That's a great question. So I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, there was a drama going on in my family. So my sister and brother-in-law live close to my dad down in Texas. And I have been somewhat distant with my dad. My sister has been much more involved with him. And my brother-in-law was angry about that. So he saw how his wife was, really like giving a lot to our dad and that she could use some support. And I went down there for a visit. And granted, it had been a while since I'd been down there. And I did not see this coming, but he basically, kind of lit into me at one point and just kind of said, "You're being a bad daughter, you're being a bad sister," and I ended up getting very reactive. So we had a fight. And then later when I calmed down, I thought, I think part of the reason I got reactive is that he touched a nerve where I'd already been feeling somewhat guilty, like, I have not been very involved. So that was an example of me not receiving feedback very well in the moment. But what I do and what I invite my clients to do is consider everything. So what I tell my clients is, if I give you some feedback, if we're going to work together, my requirement is that you consider it. It doesn't make me the expert on you, but you consider it and you at least spend some time with it to search out and see if it feels true. And then, Shelsea, to answer your question, where I go to determine if it's true is my body. We know our truth.
Yeah.
And so,
stay present.
Yeah, exactly. My body will resonate, and it can, fortunately, it has more wisdom than my mind, and it will tell me, that's actually true. So I have this really great relationship with this truth teller, which is my body. And so when I'm sifting through what lands and what doesn't, that's where I go.
What does it feel like? The experience of like resisting something that's true?
Well, if I'm resisting it, then I'm tense and my jaw's probably clenched and my mind is full of like my defense, like a defense attorney, of why that person's
every
wrong.
argument.
Why that person's wrong. And so if I notice that and I can just sort of block all out that and recommit to, I'm more interested in learning than being right, then it just calms all that chatter down and I'm available to breathe. And there's just a resonance. This is something that everybody should learn, is how do we know what's true inside? Our body will resonate in a particular way.
So I think I've heard you talk about this at a workshop about, I've heard, and people at my work will be like, if you give me feedback in this way, that's when I can hear you. How do you respond to like how people give feedback and when you should receive it and when you shouldn't? Like if they make an offensive comment or something.
Well, I think there's a difference between criticism and feedback. So, first of all, I would invite your team to make that distinction.
Yeah.
Some of that has to do with intent. Like, do I really have this person's best interest at heart? Am I coming from a place of, this may be hard to hear, but, I think it's something for you to consider. So there's some skill developed around, that exchange. But tell me the question again.
Like, I don't know, if somebody says you're like you were saying, you're being a bad daughter, it's not like specific feedback and like, here's this, in this situation you did this and this is how you can improve. Like, it's not like professional feedback. It may be like, I'm just feeling really frustrated and it feels like you're being a bad daughter. Like, how do you respond to that kind of feedback?
Well, I told you how I did respond at the moment, which I don't think was great. How I am able to respond when I'm more grounded is to take a deep breath and go tell me more. Like, do you have some examples? When did you notice that? I get curious rather than defensive.
Yeah, and that's got to be so hard to like be able to maintain that sense of curiosity in that moment.
I love the use of the word consider, because that word invites in a pause
Right.
of just being with it, where you
Yeah.
don't have to decide if it's right or wrong or good or bad. And I
Yeah.
think that's really cool.
Yeah. And what's true is we're not the expert on each other.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I'm ultimately the expert on me and you're the expert on you. So when we have a friendly intent and a trust, then we can give feedback and consider it and value it, because there's things other people can see about me that I can't see about myself. So I want the feedback if I'm, again, invested in growing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Julia.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great start.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Thank you
You
so
too.
much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I love that woman.
I know. Oh my God. I got so intimidated by her coming on right away.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just respect the shit out of her.
She has cool fashion sense. She's looking good.
I know, those glasses are just stunned.
But I will never forget when we were all in a room doing a training for this Brazil project that we worked on.
Yeah.
And Julia did training for us.
On feedback, right?
Part of it was about feedback.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is the drama triangle.
Yes, that is her like go-to. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the relationship between people being a hero and a victim and a villain, and the relationship between those three roles that get all played out. And she had different stuffed animals to represent each thing. I think Buzz Lightyear was the hero, if I recall.
That sounds familiar.
Eeyore was the victim. I don't remember who the villain was. But it's interesting how those three roles can kind of come to depend on each other.
Yeah. It's almost like if you are a victim, you are a hero and a villain.
Yeah.
I think she kind of like states
you can
that.
Jump around in that drama triangle.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are considered villains consider themselves victims.
Yeah. And
heroes.
And
yeah.
heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we all probably do that on some level.
Yeah. We also have, I feel like Julia talks about this, is we have a culture that worships heroism.
Uh-huh.
Like, in what we mean by victim, villain, hero is like taking 100% responsibility of a situation is being out of the drama triangle. But if you're a hero, you take 150% responsibility of the situation. So you do your part and then you do someone else's part, and you might save people. And a victim does 50%, and so on and so forth.
Being the hero is a trap. It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much.
So look, I've had recently some people on the internet, because this howling thing kind of put me in a hero position. And I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want it.
Well, what's funny is they put you in a hero position and a villain position. Like, you're constantly in one of those two.
Yeah. And a victim. Some people also feel very bad for me.
Like, they come to your rescue.
Yeah. I get all three of those super hardcore in that crazy fucking page.
Well, nothing's more entertaining than drama.
Oh my God, so true. Way to get through the quarantine.
All right, we are bringing on our next guest, which is, we're at the right time, right?
Yes, it is 7:29. It is time for Brett Randall.
The two named hero, victim, villain. No, it's not like that. All right.
Hello?
He's probably waiting till specifically at 7:30.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Hi.
He's got the microphone.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You're looking so casual compared to the pictures I've seen of you.
Oh. Do I have to turn one of the things? I think the Facebook's echoing.
Oh no, I think you're good.
Cool. No, just on my side.
Oh, okay.
Hey.
Hi, Brett Randall.
How's it going?
It's good. Will you introduce yourselves?
All of me, all the many me's. Sure. So I'm Brett. Creatively, I'm a writer, a musician, a yogi musician. And then professionally, I do writing and brand storytelling for diverse founders and thought leaders. And just floating through this life.
Nice. Keep floating. Um, what are your first thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, it's like you guys were mentioning, it's a big, expansive topic. So I broke it down into 6 quadrants.
Yeah. You brought,
So I was thinking through it. I was like, there's personal feedback, and then there's creative feedback. So like, there's like who you are and how you're acting and who you're being. And then also, I feel like a lot of us are working on something or towards something. So sometimes you want feedback on like an item or a creative pursuit, and other times there's feedback on like you and who you are and how you're acting. And then I put there's solicited and unsolicited. Sometimes you seek feedback, sometimes you get feedback. And then I just put aware and unaware, like how receptive you are to the awareness of the feedback. Like you can receive it, but still not truly be aware of it. Or you can receive and be hyper aware of it. And then there's the integration of the feedback.
That's interesting. The idea of being hyper aware of feedback and that being a potential roadblock is an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, feedback itself is just it's like an instrument for growth. So it's a strange thing because it's growth and reflection and then integration. So like whether it's you or what you're working on, it can be weird to get it attacked or opened up or supported from different angles. But I guess the ideal outcome is some form of growth.
Yeah.
And like when you're talking about like awareness, unawareness, I'm always curious because like when I know there's something like a deficit in myself or a deficit in something I'm creating, and I'm kind of expecting that feedback, my response is a lot different than if it's like completely out of my awareness.
Totally. I think framing is like a very important part of feedback. Whether you've framed receiving it or giving it, either way, and like if you're prepared for it, kind of like you said earlier when you come to me, just scary feedback monster.
You intimidate me so much.
Yeah, you told me that before. I'm like, what? But
I know.
But you also seem to appreciate it, so I like that. And I like if there's like a standard of it when you're coming to it for a certain element of the feedback you're receiving. But like when I was thinking,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Like creatively, because since I do a lot of writing, I've been in tons of writing workshops, which, as they say, when you're a writer, you develop a thick skin, which is super necessary because it's like your baby that you're creating or anything you're creating. And then people start to tear it apart. But when people reach out to me sometimes, like, hey, can you critique my poem or my Bryce, actually, we connected a couple weeks ago. And I always frame it, especially for creative stuff. I was like, do you want light, positive, supportive feedback, or do you want intense, tear it apart feedback? Yeah. And he was like, I want intense, tear it apart feedback. Because if you don't know, and then he never sent me the poem.
He just walked by as you said that.
I know, I saw your eyes go up in the corner. Hi, Bryce. Because yeah, sometimes someone will be like, hey, can you give me feedback? And sometimes you need just a positive, lovey-dovey, floaty stuff, just to feel good. But if you're trying to actually, especially with writing or creations or business, like you need the harder stuff. But I think you need to be prepared for that. So it's good to frame it that way.
How has your relationship with your specific writing and feedback like evolved over the years?
A lot.
Does your writing feel like less of a part of you now? Because
No, writing is everything of me. But I've learned how to take feedback. Like I got really good at taking feedback, and I actually get like in my classes, like other people who are new to feedback, they'll get really offended by it because it's the thing you've been spending 5 years on it, and then people are like, this thing doesn't work and your characters suck and there's no conflict here. And you're like, ah. But you learn, in the act of creation and outside the feedback, it is you and your baby. But in the feedback zone, you have to separate yourself so that you can look at it like more clinically. Because the goal, at least in writing and that workshop format, is I'm trying to improve my story. So I need constructive feedback from a a different viewer, and whatever you say is going to be helpful. And then there's the next level, which is learning how to interpret which feedback and what to use and what to leave away. And that you develop with time as you know yourself and the goal of your project more. And so you could say, oh, this person, they're reading it in the way that I want my ideal reader to read it. I might take some of that feedback. Or like, this person is totally not into magical realism. If they hate my dream sequence, I'm probably not going to take their feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to jump in, or I can keep going?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like I wonder if like how do you not take things personally?
I think that's I do a little bit, not so much anymore, but I've been, at least with that, like with creative writing and fiction, the first like 10 workshops, I took things very personally. Fuck you. I don't know.
Have you ever had the experience where you like write a character that is effectively you in some ways and then it gets criticized?
I mean, all characters are kind of you, but the main character of my novel is like kind of me-ish. So if like this person sucks, then it would probably suck. But they're not usually critiquing that. It's more of like the elements of the plot and the interaction of the characters and all that stuff. But I mean, I used to, like years ago, I got more offended, but then you learn, it's just like anything with practice, you learn how to process it more. And now like I very much view that, at least the creative feedback process, as that, so I can detach myself from it.
And then do you ever like retreat away from feedback for a long time and just be like, I need to just work on this by myself, and like it's not a time for feedback?
Totally. I actually think it's very important to be aware of the moment. Kind of like what Danny said earlier. Like if he's coming to me for my intense feedback, like you don't want to come too early. Like I won't give people my thing to look at too early until it's ready. I think Hemingway talked about this. Like you shouldn't show your manuscript to someone until you've squeezed like everything out of it, because then you start to get half processed thoughts from other people on things that you haven't fully developed. So it's like once you've fully, and there's different elements, like you can get some guidance in the way, but once you fully squeeze your brain and squeeze the project, then it's like time to get feedback.
Oh, that sounds so painful, because then it's like you work so hard on it and you're so committed to it. And
it's rough.
They just like tell you to throw the whole thing out.
But I think it's like a good practice of detachment. Like as you learn more and more, like you know it's coming. Like it doesn't matter if you've been working this thing for 5 years, 5 people are going to tear it apart, and some of them are going to say this is awful, blah blah blah. But you also like, you know that all that's not true because they may not fully get what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So then the next difficult part is learning how to be like a detector of like which ones you have like a little thing in your brain, and then you like, oh, this feedback works. Like this one I'm not listening to.
Yeah.
What, like if you could give a basic tip on how to get to that point, like what would you say?
I think first is like identifying. I think most people go into feedback like excited and blind, and then it can crush you. So like going into it with that mindset of like, I'm here to improve my project. It's going to be rough. A lot of people are going to say things that may critique it or be negative, but that's all part of like the growing process. I mean, I guess it's like therapy and everything else we're doing for growth.
Yeah, when you're talking, it does sound like a very like self-exploration, almost spiritual thing.
Totally. And like with spirituality is awareness. So I think going into it with awareness, I think it makes it easier. Like I literally go in like smiling, like people are going to tear it apart. And like I laugh as if they don't get something, or like they're making like some like negative remark, I'm just like, whatever. When like years ago, I'd be like, yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a practice, and it takes just like everything repetition, but
yeah.
You have to go. It's the whole don't take anything. Read the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and then go into workshop.
That's one more fast question.
Yeah.
One more fast question. So going back to this like internal brain meter thing where you're determining what feedback is good or not good. And going back to what Julia said about feeling things in her body, do you feel it in your body as well? Like what feels right?
With feedback? I think so, yeah. Because I'm like, while I'm getting feedback, I'm like, there's like a blob of subconscious interacting where I'm perceiving who they are as a person, what their writing interests are and how they're responding to me. Because you also like someone might be like, this character just doesn't work, it sucks. But they might be a new writer. They might like hate your style of writing, like I said before, just like personal preference. So you have to know what to take. And then there might be someone who really vibes with your style and they give you feedback. You're like, oh, I didn't see that with my character. So it is like a natural flow of like learning things, feeling things, seeing how they're responding. It's like a blob.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's such a mental, so much mental gymnastics.
And I've done it like almost every week for the last 6 years. It's like every time it's like, whew, I go like into some form of workshop. So even critiquing, I know I have to jump off, but like critiquing others is an art as well. Cause you have to like make sure you're not, especially newer people who are used to getting feedback or workshop, but you don't want to like crush them. So there's like also an art to navigating the feedback. And each time you have to like breathe before it and make sure you're like doing it well.
That's so intense.
Will you be staying on for the group chat?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Brett.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Talking to you.
See you later.
See ya.
How intense is that to do like every single week?
Yeah.
You like sit down like for like someone to pick you apart.
Yeah.
You're kind of going through that process actually with your
Impact
Denver project thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're still getting to know each other. And so I don't know if they feel fully comfortable yet, really tearing me apart.
Yeah.
Some people do, and I appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
But I also appreciate like a balance. Like I like people who are like, yeah, go get him, Tiger. I like people who are like, that's fucking ridiculous, you know?
Yeah.
So, but what I was thinking with Brett and Julia and what I really like, it's so simple, but like being open to growing was both of their messages, you know?
Yeah.
Like Brett was like, feedback only works for me when I'm going in knowing that I want to improve.
Yeah.
But if you're just coming in like, give me feedback, you can get crushed in that process.
I also think it's really interesting the way they're like conceptualizing the experience of determining whether something is true. It seems like this kind of intuitive thing.
Yeah, I feel like that's the thing.
Yeah. And like Julia's like all about feeling it in her body. Brett had this like imagery thing that he had kind of constructed of this like blob.
Yeah, he's like going through like a mental image of who's giving him feedback.
Yeah. It's like very much a writer's game to do something like that too. To think about like the relationship of the character to the concepts and why they would feel the way that they felt and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the world construction.
Maybe Lauren will have some kind of a construction based around food.
Oh, that's awesome. How do you know when to take feedback and when to not?
I don't know. That's why I asked the question.
Awesome.
No, I mean, I think that part of it is intuitive. But I also really appreciated what Julia said about giving that moment of consideration.
Yeah.
And, you know, I also think it's worth acknowledging that for, I think, myself and everybody, you don't always process the feedback in the moment that you're receiving it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes me like 10 times to hear something before I'm like, actually, that is good feedback. You know, or maybe I don't even have to hear it a bunch of times, but I have to like let it soak in.
I found too with that, like if I've gotten the same feedback 10 times and the 10th time I take it, there's something about it where like I wasn't ready for the feedback yet.
Yeah.
Like there's like almost like your heart has to kind of meet the feedback. You know, like I can tell one of my traumatized children that like they need to be a good person to empathize with people and give back to their community, but they're not ready for that feedback.
Yeah.
They're ready for, okay, we need you to like be respectful when you ask for something. You know? So there's like levels of feedback that people need to. Yeah.
I think Julia used the word resonance, and it makes me think of like tuning forks or when you're tuning a guitar.
Yeah.
And like when two notes align and it just like vibes properly.
Yeah, that's a really good image.
Like I feel like you have to be at the right resonance to match with that feedback, and sometimes you're just not there, which is just saying what you said but in a different way.
I like that image of tuning fork. And now it's time for
Lauren How.
That was, you need to be on like
You
TV.
set me up for that.
Yeah.
It's time for. Hello.
Hi, Lauren.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you guys
All
hear me?
right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
How you
Nice to
doing?
see you both.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Shelsea, for the bird feeder you delivered to us.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't become a squirrel feeder.
The
That's
sensor is totally there.
Yeah, it was fun to run up to your house and deliver that. I can't wait to see your yard and stuff one day.
One day, fingers crossed, hopefully
Yeah.
soon.
Well, gosh, there's so much we could catch up with you in regards to your life. But first, tell us a sentence or two for the audience. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. So my name is Lauren. I know Shelsea and Danny in the Soul Stories community because I used to live at the Orbis International House. So we were all roommates at one point in time. At that time, I was really involved with the slow food movement. So I'm a very strong, sustainable and socially just food systems activist and advocate. I currently have a job now at the City and County of Denver as a grant program manager. But I have to say that I'm here representing myself and not the city and county right now. But that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
Awesome.
And you did Soul Stories years ago.
I did. I facilitated a Soul Stories workshop on reconnecting with food and being reflective about our personal relationship and story with food.
That's so cool.
It was such a good workshop. I love that workshop.
I don't know if you heard me say a couple minutes ago that maybe your metaphors around receiving feedback are going to be related to food.
Oh, that's a tall order, Shelsea.
But let's just start off with what were some of your first thoughts when you started to reflect on receiving feedback?
Yeah, it was actually really serendipitous timing when you asked if I wanted to participate, because I feel like I had one of these moments at work this week that was just like a really intense feedback moment, and it was pretty tough to digest, and I've kind of been thinking about it all week, and so I was like, oh, this might be like an interesting cathartic experience to like talk through with some people that I admire and whose opinions I really value. So yeah, I guess my first thoughts on feedback, who I go to, kind of depends on the issue. Obviously, if it's a work-related thing, I tend to go to my colleagues. I often go to Dane, my partner, because these days, literally, he's the only person I see.
Yeah.
So he's good to chat with. And then I sometimes go to my family. I feel like my parents and sister, it's kind of hard as far as like, they don't really know what I do and we don't really connect on that level. So I usually don't go to them about work-related stuff. But then I often lean on my mentor and good friend, Andy, who you both know, who's like 30 years my senior, and he's a scientist. He always tells me to get more data before I make decisions. And so I trust his opinion quite a bit.
Do you feel comfortable telling us about the feedback you received this week and what that process was like for you?
Even if you don't tell us exactly what the feedback was, maybe
you can
how
be
it
general.
felt, or...
Yeah, totally. So let's see. As part of my job, I manage a commission of individuals who help make grant decisions. And I see a large part of my role as ensuring that our commission is diverse and representative and equitable. And so I developed this survey to try to understand what kind of demographic and geographic representation was on the commission. And I had asked questions about things like, what neighborhoods in Denver do you have expertise in? And what is your gender identity, racial ethnic group, socioeconomic status, things like that. I knew that a lot of the questions were maybe like really personal and could be perceived as invasive, which is why I wanted the feedback of my colleagues. So I shared this survey with them to see like, hey, am I on the right track? I think it's really important if we really value diversity, equity, and inclusion to start to ask questions and identify where we're at so we know where we need to be. And I was just really surprised because I got a lot of pushback from my coworkers who I typically think of as allies in this work. And they said it was they felt like it was tokenizing, that people would not feel comfortable answering the questions, and that I should basically hack the survey and not ask any of the really personal things. And instead I should infer the information from people's resumes or like personal interactions. And that just like caught me way off guard. It was really, really hard to hear, because I feel like doing this work, you have to put it all out there. And if we're not really forthright about it, then it's not practicing our values.
So in that, like, because I agree with you in the perspective you're sharing, was there anything that like you walked away being like, maybe they have a point, or was it kind of like you felt like we're just on different pages right now?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I think I'm learning a lot about what it means to be a government employee. And kind of the expectations of public servants, the transparency and accountability we have to taxpayers, what we're legally allowed to ask about and not. So I realized, for example, I was not allowed to really have a question about disability status because of the American Disabilities Act, and like not being able to make it seem like we're discriminating based on certain statuses. So I definitely like recognize the boundaries that I operate under in my job. And then I think I also, because I wasn't really sure who to go to, I went to a friend who's also a person of color who works for the state, a state agency. And she told me I should read the book White Privilege. So that's on my reading list. I don't think my colleagues are racist, obviously. I think that sometimes, though, it's really natural to resort to a certain reaction, even if it's not, conscious or intentional.
Were these people authority or kind of like in a different hierarchical space than you?
So that's a good question. Most of the people I sent it to were on my team, so like horizontal colleagues, but I did also include my direct manager, who I tend not to go to get feedback from her unless I've exhausted kind of other sources, because she's super busy and I try not to bother her. So that's been kind of an interesting dynamic, getting feedback from her, because she tends to go right for the critical, maybe somewhat negative feedback. And I've told her, I was like, I really like constructive criticism, but I also need some positive feedback at times as well. Like that's really important to me and how I am as a human and how I operate.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I feel like a lot of people like to be really like tough guides about it, and be like, give it to me straight. I like direct feedback. I think we were talking about this yesterday, right?
Yeah, my boss says everybody will tell you that they like direct feedback, and most people don't like direct feedback. I guess I still like the story, and maybe I'm digging too deep, but like it kind of felt like to me that maybe like the work that you're tasked to do, like actually doing the authentic work in like diversity and inclusion, like doing it like authentically, came off as threatening. Like that's kind of what I'm projecting. Is that fair? Am I like missing it, or?
Yeah, that feels right to me as well. And it's hard because I think, government does try to express these values, but it's often harder to actually do. It's easier to say it's a core value than to actually live it and put it into practice. And then when people do the real work of trying to do it, it's kind of scary, because it does make people feel uncomfortable, and it can come off as threatening and invasive. And I'm just trying to figure out how to strike that balance of doing justice to these issues, and also not making people feel terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
There's like a balance.
Right. Like, and it kind of, I'm wondering, like, is there an open space in this dynamic for there to be a dialogue around some kind of a compromise? Like, would there be could you have a conversation around, like, what about providing some context before people take the survey so people understand why this matters, or,
Totally. So I think where I left everything with it was removing a lot of the questions that were maybe too much, but there were a few that I really didn't feel comfortable bending on, like racial or ethnic group. And also if folks filling out the survey have lived experience with hunger or food insecurity, because that is something that we really, I think, want representation in our decision-making group. Like if you have experience with these issues, we want your voice at the table,
Right.
Living from that authentic experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's the thing, you know, you want people affected by the issue making decisions alongside, not just the powerful making the choices.
Yeah, and like we all need to know when there is time to push back on something. Like just because people who have maybe been in the job longer than you, or you know, whatever kind of demographics they have, just because they say that something's right doesn't mean that you should just, you know, like bow your head to that.
Yeah.
You know,
I think I was also like pretty frank with my colleagues. Like I thank them for their time, because obviously giving feedback cuts into your own time. And so I was super appreciative of that. But then I think it's important for us to all remember that when processes are unstructured, they tend to favor dominant groups, and they tend to continue to disempower historically marginalized groups. And so the more kind of structure and egalitarian playing field we can put in place for people, hopefully that does correct some power imbalances.
yes, that's a very good ending point.
Well said, Lauren Howe.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's really nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm gonna have to hop off, but enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much.
Awesome. See you later.
Bye.
That is so true, though.
The pushback.
The idea that if we just leave things as they are, it will not be naturally equitable.
And you know what I was even thinking of in that is like the structure of how you do feedback.
Speak of it.
Like I'm thinking about, and this doesn't represent historically marginalized people, but I was thinking about at work in our leadership meetings, our most like it's a very unstructured meeting. And what that does is it leaves it in the hands of the powerful to make the calls and lead the decisions. And we're always looking to this person. But if you have structures on decisions are made by like 4 out of 7 people have to agree to it.
Yeah.
If feedback is given by this, and we're going to have structures around it, then the powerful are then all like equalized.
Yeah.
And that's how I took it in like a microcosm.
Yeah, that's an interesting example.
How did you take it in a macrocosm?
Well, what you just said kind of made me think, because I'm always talking about the howling page. But like I felt like early on when we first started it, we were able to make decisions on a case-by-case basis about what to allow on the page and what not to allow. And we had capacity for that. But then as you start to grow and add more people on, there needed to be a certain structure around what we all agreed upon, because right now there's around 25 moderators, and we all have our own little prejudices.
Yeah.
And we all have our ideas about what is political and not political, and our own ideas around what is like overly sexual content versus like just like a joke about somebody's butt or something. Like we have, it has to become very, very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
and
like
the structure behind
specificity
it takes the power away from you.
Yeah.
Because then you have to abide by what everybody has agreed to.
Right. Exactly. And like there were times when I had to like check my own opinions because somebody made a post about doing something that was witchy or being a witch. And I didn't put that in my mind in the context of that's a religious post. But then a Christian person reached out to me and they were like, hey, how come I can't post about Jesus and she can post about being a witch?
Yeah.
And so,
there's so much.
Rules can be in place as a kind of like a buffer against prejudice or against like making assumptions.
Yeah, they can be an equalizer.
Yeah.
If they're done right.
Yeah.
Or they can be oppressive.
Yeah.
Kelsey says, also speaking to Lauren, also, comment, please ask questions. Sorry we haven't been getting to the audience as much as we'd like to usually, but comment. Tell us what you think about what people are saying and ask more questions. I will include them in our interview. And she said, the people that she was talking to are so immersed in the culture that they have been subdued. So now you coming in fresh can bring a new perspective.
Love it.
All right, without further ado,
let's bring Jason on. People are howling outside.
People are howling.
Oh, hello, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
How's it going?
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hear you great.
I like
It's
that.
8 o'clock. Everyone's howling outside.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jason. Introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jaser. He, him, his pronouns. Right now on my screen it says comma Geo because this is my work account that I'm using for Zoom. I work for this organization called Geo, which stands for Grant Makers for Effective Organizations. And we basically educate foundations, which are funders across the US, about equity-informed practices in grant making, as well as just like how to center community when you're making grants. So yeah, happy to be here with all of you. I also live at the Orbis Institute, had the pleasure of living with both Shelsea and Danny for a little bit. And yeah, I tried to be a mesh in all things community centered and community building because I feel like it's an essential part of the human experience. So happy to share more about what I think about feedback during this time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Should we jump into the community stuff or?
Yeah. So I was kind of wondering if you would be interested in speaking on like specifically feedback within the Orbis house because it's such a unique experience to live there. How many people are in the house right now?
So there are 7 of us now in the Orbis Institute. There could be 8 depending on who lives in what room, but there are 7 right now.
And have you, like being in quarantine, how is it going as far as feedback goes? Has that had to come up a lot?
Yeah, that's a good question. It has come up, and I think it's because we set intentional time for discussing what's working and what's not working, especially around like work situations. Luckily, everyone in the house has employers that allow them to go remote. So we're all working virtually and trying to work on our computers at the same time and having Zoom calls at the same exact time. So we had to systematize like what does work mean at Orbis, as we also systematize like what living just as normal humans looks like.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. But like the feedback kind of comes to a head after our like house meetings on Tuesday nights. So we have like a specific dedicated time to just talk about like, again, like we phrase it as like what's working, what's not working, like who's going shopping for whom, like what does the like grocery situation look like, what does it look like to cook for each other, what does it look like to share space, and how has that been working for people? So it's been good.
So have you had either explicit conversations or do you have thoughts now on do's and don'ts for how you want to receive feedback?
I would say like best practice, or like I have a lot of thoughts on feedback in general. And I think even though people will say like they're interested in feedback, it comes like oftentimes feedback isn't received or felt well because of 3 reasons, like a lack of trust is number 1, insecurity is another one, and 3, a power complex. So like a story that I can tell is that I think there were moments at the beginning of like when we went into quarantine where I don't feel like our relationships were as strong as they could have been. So there wasn't like this like a significant amount of trust built up to be able to say like, hey, like I don't think we should be going shopping individually like anymore. Hey, I don't think you should be hanging out with that friend as closely as you do anymore. And so like that, I feel like that, you know, that came to a head really quickly. But but all things considered, I mean, like we were able to have vulnerable conversations with each other because we built up more and more trust that, you know, we could and we should feel safe in our own home. So, yeah.
What is that process like of building trust? Like, what do you do to get there? Because I agree with you. That's when I give my best feedback, is when I trust somebody or they trust me. That's when the communication flows.
Yeah. I think it can be built over like many vulnerable sessions, honestly. Just like what Soul Stories is trying to create. Like, but like being intentional about that time of vulnerability and not just doing it for performance sake, but doing it because you actually like it's a necessity, or because you I don't know, because it's real. So I think that starts, I mean, that starts a good I know route to trusting each other. I also think like here at Orbis, like we're around each other 24/7. And so the once we went into quarantine, there was almost this moment of like, well, let me like not talk with the roommates because I don't want to annoy them as much anymore. And I feel like we just had to lean into uncomfortable conversations and lean into like, hey, like I'm not feeling good right now and I want to tell you that, you know, and this is how this annoyance is showing up and manifesting. I don't know, I feel like that helps to build trust, is just when you're honest.
Yeah, it makes me think about like team building, trust falls, you know, those kinds of activities.
Yeah.
And like even like the Orbis house, just like sitting around in the kitchen and talking, or just like chilling, which doesn't like on the outside of mind doesn't seem like a productive thing to do. But it's almost like you're kind of building up this stuff in your savings for later when difficult things do come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like being intentional about the fact that like, you know, our time is limited at Orbis, you know, like I will be only here for another year, which is sad to think about, and saying like, no, I am going to commit to my community here. Like I'm only here for a short amount of time. So like these people I am going to invest in, and like, yeah, I may get a call from a friend that I haven't, you know, talked with in a little bit, but like if a roommate's right in front of me and we're having a really good conversation, then it's like, they need to be prioritized, you know? So like prioritizing relationships is one of those things. Yeah, and I think that's critical.
It's almost like the commitment to something is what opens feedback, or opens people to feedback. Because like if you're half in, half out of the house, then like feedback can seem like a attack on you or something.
Yeah, exactly. And like more than anything, I feel like because we are growing closer together, then feedback is actually a gift. Because we're letting somebody into what the inner workings of our mind actually are, you know, instead of hiding it. And I think honestly, it's a white dominant norm to like hide how you're feeling and like hide how you are thinking about somebody. And so like deconstructing that in your mind of like, I'm not going to silence myself for the sake of feeling comfort, you know. I'm thinking specifically about constructive and negative feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Necessarily like positive feedback, but like to hide negative feedback is very much like a colonizer's way of doing things.
That's were you listening to the last interview with Lauren?
No, I wasn't.
You built off of it so perfectly.
So we're kind of deconstructing that, but not explicitly calling that out. You know what I mean? Not explicitly being like, you know, we're decolonizing our brains, and we're not actually saying that, but like I think a practice of just being vulnerable and open and actually saying what's on your mind, like naming the thing that's been hurting you or naming the thing that you want to change, is challenging a white dominant norm, which is cool.
That's really awesome.
And it's kind of a way of like you just like showcasing yourself and being like, this is how I feel, this is how I think, this is how I operate. Like you're now getting to know me on like a much deeper level, even if the feedback like misses each other, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a boss, sorry, I don't know how much time we have, but
Dude, tell this last story.
Keep going.
Okay, all right, I had a boss, this is just one thing that I've been thinking about with feedback, is I had a previous boss who wanted me to be very open to feedback And she herself said she was very open to feedback. And I think that's a quality that a lot of people are looking for in workplaces nowadays, is just like, how receptive are you to change, and how receptive are you to feedback? But it's interesting because she provided feedback that I completely disagreed with in a lot of instances. And I implemented it because I thought it was the right thing to do. Just one thing on closing note is that you have to trust the person that is giving you feedback and actually want to follow them and actually respect them, because it determines the course of how that feedback is then manifested. Because for me, once it was manifested, I was becoming somebody that I didn't want to become, simply because I was respecting the feedback more than my internal intuition. So I think you can have the both and with this, and take some feedback with a grain of salt as well. That not all feedback is great, because it could be coming from somebody that you do not want to become. So also saying that.
How do you experience the intuition? Like, is it something in your body that you feel, or is it like a voice in your head? Or
well, you can feel that it's not you, or you can feel that it's almost immoral. Like for me, it was like, well, I'm implementing this feedback, which is not relationship centered. Like the feedback that she gave me was basically like, results matter, do your job, and like ignore relationships right now. And I was like, that doesn't feel like, I did it for like, a month. And then I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like me. This feels like I am a pawn for my boss, rather than like a part of like feeling like fully myself at work.
yeah,
That becomes draining. And I feel like that's an intuitive cue, is when your energy is totally drained and you're not feeling like yourself anymore, then maybe the feedback isn't necessarily great.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here with us. It was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Jason.
Yeah, of course.
Quinn is going to be our last guest, and then we're going to have a little group discussion. Are you available to come back on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be back on. Cool.
Cool.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Oh, I admit, nope. Did it go through? Nope.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Great.
All right. So we just go for it? Yeah. All right. We're 3 minutes early, but.
But before we do we have any comments?
We have Jovan saying, also, Quinn, you don't have to come on for 2 minutes if you're there, because I don't think it's speaker view. So.
Okay.
Anyways, Jovan just gave us a heart.
Oh, nice.
Any comments, any thoughts, suggestions? How's everybody feeling out there? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on receiving feedback? How has it been going for you?
I have thoughts. Thank you for asking.
Let's hear them.
I just loved Lauren to Jaser on the white dominant culture.
Yeah.
And I loved that Jaser was like, the white dominant culture is don't name the thing in the room. Don't be vulnerable with what's happening. And that's what Lauren butted up against. Was she was like, I want to know, I want to get the information, I want to be able to understand our, like, who we're reaching out to and who we're recruiting. And they were like, no, just infer.
Yeah.
Like
don't pry.
Don't pry.
Yeah.
Just judge from afar.
Yeah.
And that was it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about it from the lens of that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So much unpacking to do.
I know.
Colonialism.
I know. And I feel it's going to take 300 years past our lives to do it too.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's just like, it's a good thing to just kind of be aware of, in all of our relationships with people from all different kinds of cultures.
Yeah.
Just that like some cultures are more willing to, and like naturally going to be more open about how they feel.
Yeah.
Or more direct. And like not necessarily to judge it, but just to understand that there's that difference.
Yeah.
Lots of very thoughtful people today.
I feel like there's so much to digest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have these moments in between, actually, to just kind of take a breath and like digest it and chew on it a little bit.
I love that Jason added the element of like trusting. Like trust between a relationship, the feedback goes really far.
Yeah. One thing we haven't talked about very much is positive feedback. So I want to make sure we talk to Quinn about that.
Yeah,
Should we bring him on? Can we do that?
he's on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're just waiting.
There we go. Oh my gosh, look at that.
Look who's got the cowboy hat.
Oh, wait, okay. Yeah, I didn't even see myself. So I've done too many Zoom meetings to show up normal, so I always
Yeah.
Oh.
That's so funny. When we first started doing this, I was like wearing tutus and all kinds of like funky stuff and dressing myself in Christmas lights.
Hey, you
Something's representing.
gotta keep things interesting, yo. It's been an interesting time for sure, and so this is my little bit of rebellion.
Nice.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself for those who are watching?
Word, yeah. Kevin Quinn Marchman, as y'all introduced me previously. I'm an actor by trade, a teaching artist, writer, director, and producer. Usually I just say theater dude. Doing a little bit of everything, dabbling.
Nice.
Awesome.
What was your first what's your first intuition on this topic?
A lot of different like converging narratives, I think. I think the first way to approach feedback is like, as an actor, you have a director and that person is there to be the feedback. And I think I've gotten several roles because I know how to take direction. So I take pride in being able to receive feedback well and then implement it. But also, I think in the last couple of years, I've been learning more about how to advocate for myself, especially in the rehearsal space, because that's where, I mean, everyone's playing their role. And so the director, they are your boss in ways. And it is really hard to kind of push back sometimes, but you have that right as an actor. You're the one doing the work. You are telling the story of that character. And so it's been a fun exploration for me to say, okay, great. Thank you for giving me that suggestion. And I think that my character is playing this reason why. So it's justification. You always have to justify what you're doing on stage. And not necessarily yourself as an actor, but the character itself. So if the character is doing something that makes sense with the story, makes sense with the role that they are within the story, then that's kind of the conversation that you have back and forth with the director and even sometimes your castmates. So that's an interesting one, because sometimes it's not feedback, it's you're being told what to do, but there is still space to follow up. I think one of the questions y'all asked us to prep with is like, how do you go about seeking feedback or responding? And I think it is just questions. So if someone gives me feedback that I'm not vibing with, I ask them a question about their perspective on that feedback, or specifically in the rehearsal space, ask them questions about my character.
It's an interesting metaphor for life, because the director can see things that you cannot see, you know?
Yeah.
And so generally that's what we would hope, is like somebody in our lives can be kind of on the outside looking in and be able to kind of show us ourselves, which I think is kind of the ideal idea of a director.
Yeah.
And then there's also the experience of being the actor and being in the feeling mode of the character, which I think is sometimes that's something that the director doesn't quite connect with.
Totally. And that's where the beginning of the talk, yeah, we're bringing up the Brene Brown quote about like who's in the arena and who's not. And there it's like different perspectives, but it's all within the arena. So it works, I think, often enough. But specifically with the feeling, like as an actor, I'm not going to go night in and night out doing a thing that doesn't feel right. So it's just a matter of taking the direction, which there's an implication of you're being told to do a thing, but there's also space for it to be a suggestion. So just working through that process has been really interesting. And like, I really enjoy the actor that I've become through being naturally good at taking direction and learning how to advocate for myself.
Because I think I totally relate to this, not being an actor at all, like just having a boss who tends to be who tends to like be a more of authoritative style. How do you get from taking feedback to, oh, okay, I do need to advocate for myself? Like, what was that shift for you?
Do you mean in the moment or like kind of the more just growth?
The arc of it.
The art, I think it was the realization, as I said, like I'm not going to do a thing I don't enjoy, night in and night out. And so,
What gave you the confidence to get to that point?
well, one, it's like talk about like who gives you feedback. It was being in the room with other actors. Like specifically, I did a play reading with the Colorado New Play Festival, and I had a like small little character, but I was like, oh, it's fun. This is me. I can do it. And I walked into the room, and everyone else was New York, LA, Chicago, Vancouver. Like everyone had national TV roles. And so I walked in the room like, oh shit, I don't belong here at all. But after the first reading, we were all now just part of the story. And so who we were as actors didn't matter as much. And one of the big homie, Toby Wyndham, he was the one who like came to me because I think he saw it. The director was telling me something, and the director's a cool dude too. No beef there if they end up watching. But he told me something, and I think just the other actors, as trained and experienced as they were, they could see that I was not vibing with what I was being told. And so just the big homie pulled me aside and he said, hey man, advocate for yourself here. And so that just several realizations happened, but most directly just the dude told me, it's like, yo, you don't have to say yes to this. And then I've just learned it's like it's easier to ask questions to be like, no, I think it should be this way. Because that's automatically creating a barrier. And in the rehearsal process, you're supposed to be exploring. So just asking questions, and then on the back end of that question, tell them how you really feel is just a little bit of wordcraft.
I have a half-formed question that I want to attempt to put out to you.
Word, yeah.
About faking it when you're receiving feedback. I'm wondering if you think that it can be valuable to just, like Julia was saying, kind of consider the feedback, just kind of try it on. And and also in this example of like being in this room with a lot of people with a lot of national acting experience. For you, do you find that faking it does kind of help you make it in a certain way, like becoming more comfortable with new experiences?
Oh, word, yeah. Like by the time you realize you don't like the direction you're being given, that should be the end of a process of trying, like hearing what they're saying, accepting that their role is to tell you that something is not working or it is, and they just want you to explore it. So the faking it, I mean, I can nod my head, but I think my eyebrows are super expressive sometimes. And so you can tell that I'm not fucking with it, even if I don't know that I'm saying that. But just to the point, you would never go in, you never take feedback with the assumption that you don't like it. You have to try it on first, as you said. And then that can be hard because it could be a complete right turn from what you had been trying, but there should never be a point within the rehearsal process where you're sure what you're going to do. So, I mean, like part of that is like wearing what your choices are. It's like, does this actually fit or not? But you should never go in one day and come back the next with the same idea of what your character is doing. And certainly you don't assume that it's right.
What a great metaphor for personhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like if we have like too strong of an identity around who we are and how we represent ourselves and like my role and all of that, I think that it makes us become very stale people.
And
It's a very inorganic way to live.
it makes me think the creative process is like you and the director ideally are both open to what's about to happen, and you both have suggestions, and you're kind of working with each other in a way.
Yeah. Well, in like on the other side of like most of the work I do is way more collaborative than that. And like one thing that I've learned is like you just need to have roles. Being in a creative process with people who all have ideas and their own talents, you need to start to um, place people in roles so it doesn't become a jumble. I mean, it's really hard to get feedback from someone when you don't even know like what they're doing or why they're here. So and like like it's so easy. It's like worry about yourself. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got my shit. I don't need to hear from you. So in a process where it's like, hey, I have an idea. I want to do a thing. Can we meet up for coffee and talk about this thing? Super cool. But the first thing that I'm interested in is like getting the idea out, but then it's defining the roles, and that way, it's because like a lot of times the director, after a certain point, the director's not giving you feedback as much as like maybe the stage manager is, and so there just needs to be the correct lines of communication. And when you're in a process where everyone starts on the same footing, it is certainly a lot harder, but you just have to um, allow space for everyone to make their discoveries. And again, I go back to just ask questions. You like it might be an ulterior motive, but it's very helpful because it challenges you. It's like you're not coming with criticism, you're coming with the request for clarification, and that takes more work. So it makes it more worthwhile by the time it actually comes out of your mouth and you're talking to the person, and hopefully vice versa.
And as Julia said, it just creates space for everybody to kind of be there together.
Yeah, and there's so much space for all of these ideas to come together. And hopefully by the time you have the final product, that has all been worked out in an equitable way where everyone feels that they've contributed.
We have one audience question for you. Jovan, you know Jovan Mays, right?
Yeah. What up, big bro?
He says, how do you manage the time and space you consume with qualifying questions? Do you ever feel like it derails things?
I think the first thing is just like knowing to let a lot of shit go. I know like I've been blessed to work more, and it's given me more of an ego, and especially like say around Shakespeare. I've done a lot of Shakespeare, so there's like a lot of times where I feel like, oh, that ain't right. Your scansion's off. Whoop de whoop, blah blah blah. So the first thing is just like letting a lot of stuff go. That it is not my job to make things perfect, but of course we all come in thinking like we know how to make a thing perfect. So like part of that process is first deciding, is it worth going through the process of the clarifying questions, or like having a phraseology for challenging stuff. Like I love say, hey, can we have a moment of real talk? And then that there is like, okay, well now it's here. So everyone comes with a little more armed, but I think one is just like realizing it's hopefully it's not your I guess I'm talking more about giving feedback than receiving it, but it's not your job to make things perfect. And so by the time that you have a clarifying question, you've already weeded out a bunch of other like small criticisms or gripes that you could have.
But also, I think you brought up this point about if you've done something a lot and you feel like you have a lot of expertise with it, really makes you have to look at something with fresh eyes every time.
Yeah. And I mean, you introduced me with like the Midsummer Night's Dream show that I did, like my first Zoom performance. And I walked into it with the assumption like, cause it was like really cool. It was all Denver School of the Arts alumni from 2008 to 2024. And so I kind of walked in like, you know, your boy's been around the block. I done Shakespeare. I've played almost every single role in Midsummer Night's Dream. So like the first 2 rehearsals, I was just mad chill. Like, yeah, I got it. I don't need feedback. But then like the dress rehearsal, like the day before with the show, seeing all of the growth that everyone else did within these characters was like, oh, see, Quinn, you just learned a thing. Like you're tight, but you're not that tight. And from that, I was just like,
it's just a different way to measure things. The difference between
yeah.
like where everyone started from versus how much everyone grew within the process.
And I didn't open myself to that, and it was still fun. But I look back on it now, like, oh man, there's probably several gems I should have taken the opportunity to, but I was closed off. So always got to remind yourself that there's more to learn.
Yeah, cool. All right, well,
Yeah.
let's bring on some more people. I think that Brett was going to come back on, right?
Yeah, Brett, if you're there, jump on Zoom. We're going to bring Jacer in right now. All right, and then I'm going to switch us to gallery view.
Nice. Cool. Well, something we haven't gotten to speak about. Have you two met before?
Yeah.
Hi, Quinn.
Hey, Jason, how you doing, dude?
I'm good.
We haven't gotten the chance to talk about receiving positive feedback yet, and I would really like to do that. How do you all feel about like the idea of receiving positive feedback? Your first feeling about it, is it like woohoo, or is it like, oh?
Well, my love language is words of affirmation. So I love it. It's also funny because like, of course, it's like, of course you're egocentric in the way of like, let me receive words of affirmation and also assume that everybody else loves words of affirmation and positive feedback. So I give a lot of positive feedback. And then a lot of people don't like those kinds of verbal expressions, especially in public, especially in front of a big group. And I do that a lot at work. And it makes like my boss feel uncomfortable. It makes like a lot of coworkers. And of course, I think it's lovely because I love receiving it. So, but yeah, I can understand why it would be uncomfortable for other people, of course, but I love it.
Yeah, I chose a career where I get the most immediate positive feedback possible. But it's also sometimes I'm uncomfortable with positive feedback in that then it feels like you have to return it. And so I've been working at the process of just like accepting compliments and not having to then do this awkward go back and forth with people. So I get that sometimes it can be weird, but for the most part, your boy loves it.
Yeah, that can be a good way to deflect positive feedback, to just kind of bounce it back at the person.
And it can be so uncomfortable, like when you say something nice and they're like, yeah, you too. And you're like, oh, that's kind of, just misses the point.
Yeah.
But like at the end of a show or a performance, like when you have to go out into the audience and then everybody is saying, congratulations, that was so great. Or like, if they didn't like the show, because they'll be like, interesting costumes or something like that. But like, I think that I don't know, I've kind of started to take congratulations with a grain of salt because of that.
Because there's so much of it.
Yeah, because at the end of a show, if you see someone after the show, I think they feel compelled that they have to compliment you.
I know as an audience member, I always leave before I have to see people.
Yeah.
Because I just know how uncomfortable it is. It's such a forced setting that like someone can love it, but it doesn't feel as genuine as like a friend just telling you, hey, your shoes are fly today. The expectation is there, like going to shows and seeing like so often the standing ovation. It's like the standing ovation should be for like shit that you're gonna remember in 50 years.
Yeah.
And so there's a weird relationship I think we have in like contemporary day with like how much praise we're supposed to give people and things. Which is that's mad uncomfortable.
What about you, Brett?
Hey, Brett.
What's up, Quinn? What's up, Jacer?
Hi, Brett.
I mean, I still think there's something a little different between like compliments and praise and feedback. And it also depends on the framing of it. So like, if I ask for feedback and then it's positive, I'm cool with it. I think there's a difference when you come off of a performance. That's more of like a, yeah, I think compliments are weird. But feedback is often like an intense space. So I think it's a nicer place to get positive feedback. But it all depends on like the frame and the setting. And I think the other thing is like the praise at the end of a performance is weird because it's like you're practicing in order to get positive performance, but then when you get it, it's just awkward and weird. But like if you didn't get it, it would suck because you just put so much time into ideally executing a great performance.
Mhm.
Word, yeah.
Do you guys have any questions for each other?
Any feedback for my talk?
Yeah.
I think the painting or the tapestry behind you is a little distracting.
I was thinking of starting to do my zooms to the other wall, but that might be more distracting.
Yeah, I mean, this is completely false. This is not the life that I normally live, but you just feel like you have to be more interesting. I think, Jason, for you, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly around feedback, but you were talking about like the process of decolonizing spaces or conversations, and it's like, how does that concept resonate with you? Like, how did it was like introduced to you, and then you're like, oh, this is actually a praxis that I want to develop.
Yeah, how was it introduced to me originally? Actually, I read a book. So have you read or heard of Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva at all?
Thank you for rephrasing it as I heard of, because reading.
Have you read it? Have you heard of it? It's a really good book. It's just about like how the system of philanthropy has literally fucked brown and black people across the board, and how we need to completely rethink how philanthropy and money and how capital is built in communities for long-lasting sustainability. And so I fell in love with the book, and then I said, you know, there are certain white dominant practices like need for perfectionism, urgency, white and black thinking, either or thinking, like the need to center results rather than relationships, like worship of the written word rather than verbal communication. And there were just certain tenets that were kind of revealed in the book that I was like, wow, there are so many of these that I practice. So many of these things that I'm married to that I actually have always felt it were kind of like not me, but the society that I was born into, and that I've adopted as a survival mechanism and as a way to be considered professional, or to be considered like a viable job candidate, you know? And these things were adopted because it was taught to me that this was necessary in order to survive in this economy. And what I'm realizing now more than ever is that we have to start the process of deconstructing those things and removing those things if we're ever going to change what's deemed valuable, or deemed what's like worthy, or like who's worthy in terms of like occupying space in a professional setting. And so I started getting into it more and more. And also I think feedback and being open to feedback is kind of like challenging, like really open to feedback, not just saying it, but like actually being receptive to feedback, as well as being willing to give it to someone else as a way of challenging some of those norms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to get that book.
It's cool.
Well,
Has anyone?
Hey, I was gonna.
What do you say after that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you heard me in the in between, but Really appreciate you bringing up those concepts, Jaser. Lauren, when she was talking, had an example of coworkers. She was giving out a survey that was asking very personal questions, and it was related to diversity and inclusion. And Lauren basically said, or Lauren gave this to her coworkers, and her coworkers were like, "Oh no, this is not going to work. We need to scrap this. Like, you infer those things. You don't like ask directly."
Yeah.
And you came right after that, and it was like such an interesting, like, she showed an example and you kind of named it, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think we just have trouble like naming the thing, like whatever's on our minds. We have like trouble just saying like, hey, like I have some pretty, heavy feedback to offer that you're pretty misogynistic, racist, or like anti-Semitic in your comments there. And I like need to call on, like I need to like provide that feedback to you as a facilitator or as a staff member, so that way you're not doing that in the future. And I feel like a lot of people don't want to engage in those moments of feedback. Like I know so many people who will come up to me afterwards and be like, hey, did you hear what that person said? I'm like, well, why don't you tell them? Like, why don't you go ahead and like call them out on it? Like, I don't know why you can't just name the thing that's on your brain right now, because I completely validate it as well.
Yeah.
That is exactly what's happening to me with the Howling page today, because today we closed posting on the page, and
How dare you?
on the page are like, you ruined everything! How dare you! Like, people are so mad. People are calling me a Nazi.
How are you handling that?
Blah, 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 blah. But in my DMs is a long list of all these people being like, thank you so much for everything you've done. All these people are being jerks to you, but I don't feel that way. I really appreciate you, and I think you're great. So I'm getting like all of this positive feedback, but people are too afraid to say it publicly. Very interesting. Another thing that what you just said brought up for me though, is just another thing that we learned on the page too, is that like it's impossible not to be political in a lot of ways. Like, we didn't set this up as a subject for talking about like decolonization and politics and all of that stuff, but that stuff is in everything.
Yeah.
And so you really can't avoid it. Like, even when you talk about a one-on-one relationship and you're not talking about the system.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is like the first time in the history of power and white people, for sure, where like there is enough space to feedback is not just personal now. It is a global, it has global implications too. So like the feedback may be like, that was a good idea, but you phrased it racistly, misogynistically, anti-Semitically. Where like that phraseology didn't exist, and certainly I don't think in a workspace it ever felt like okay to bring up. So feedback is like more like, I remember I was working with, Ase Tu Shango, the poet. I was working with him, and we were working on a small thing, and they said, Quinn, I don't want to have to tell you about yourself right now, and I was like, that. But this is the first time where it's like, we don't have enough time not to sometimes tell people about themselves, because it's conflict is a kindness sometimes, and it would, especially if it's a friend, it's a disservice to let them continue being a dumbass when you actually have the words to tell them that they're being a dumbass.
Yeah, and now more than ever, we have access to people that live very different lives from us.
Yeah.
And not only are we like accessing people from across the planet, we're also accessing people on different like socioeconomic statuses, and generation by generation, things are changing faster. So like the difference in lifestyle between myself and my great grandmother is like a huge leap compared to her and her great grandmother.
Yeah.
It's a huge leap.
And so like through that, feedback becomes more and more imperative.
Paul Yumbla says, that's my roomie, go Jaser Andre.
Hi, Paul. Glad you're
And
the room down the
Bob
hall.
says, so feedback upon exit, when you can tell it's dismissive, push back or soak? Question.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Dismissive.
So feedback, when you can tell it's dismissive, push back or soak?
Still think you need to know the whole scenario.
Yeah, it's kind of a case by case thing. But I do think that, like, back to what Quinn said, I think I would be like, well, wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand you. And if they're there for that conversation, then you can really
take it,
process it or not. Yeah.
And
But
I imagine if you question it too, and they don't have much to back it up after that, then it's probably like, well, you didn't really think it through anyways.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Just to bring it back to the howling page again. I feel like a lot of people have said things like, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but okay, to me. And then I'll be like, can you elaborate more? Or please, like, explain to me where you're coming from.
Why is it the stupidest
thing? What about it?
That's impressive, though. If it's like the stupidest thing they've ever heard in their life.
Yeah. And so it's like, I feel like I talk to them like a kindergarten teacher, and they talk to me like they're in jail and I'm their like person working in a but
how do you think you've grown from moderating this howl group?
Oh my God, in so many ways.
This is a popular topic in this household.
Yes.
What's your favorite way that you've grown?
Well, one thing that I've come to learn in just to like finish this thought is when people say like, that's really stupid, but okay. And then I do like follow through with them and really just see them and don't let them get away with not being fully seen and not really standing in what they've said and like being accountable for what they said. You'd be so surprised at how many people have actually apologized to me.
I was following the conversation today on the Uncensored page, and there's a certain fat-faced individual who was talking about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to body shame, but he had a very unflattering Facebook pic, and he was talking a lot of shit about Shelsea, so it was like, I was biased. But he was ranting and raving on the Uncensored page about the Nazi administration of the How Headache page. And then later on, he had to put an edit that he talked it through with you and that he had like apologized. And I was like, Shelsea, don't give these people that much time for growth. You don't owe them that. But it was amazing because that dude fit every stereotype and bias that I have of someone who would be entirely unwilling to hear your side. And the 2-hour saga of my morning, this man grew as a human being because you took the time. Yeah,
it's definitely like a thing to find balance in. And like, there are some people that are like, no, but I insist on hating you. And then you just rickroll them, and that's fine too. But there's a lot of people that like, I'm so surprised at how many times people have apologized to me.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't expect to be held accountable for what they say.
No, I mean, not on Facebook of all places. Yeah. I can't wait until Reply All does a story on y'all, because like that is like choice internet culture.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do think that like internet is a culture, you know, and it's like kind of a battlegrounds right now of like how the culture is shaping out, and it moves like way faster than other cultures do. And so there's definitely like a very strong like white culture within Facebook, but I think that it's also like anybody's game right now of like how internet culture is shaping up.
Yeah, it's like white and Iowan. It's just like mad regular. Like I was looking at the people who were upset at y'all, and I was like, man, this y'all have the time. You truly have the time. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's
well, she almost got, or she had people threatening to sue her a week ago or so.
Was that only a week ago?
Yeah.
You've experienced so much life.
What's all the drama conflama about the Facebook page? Like, why are people?
Oh, Jason.
Well,
sorry.
basically,
Yeah, this is a
we
deep,
just turned
deep hole.
off. We turned off posting, so we pretty much closed the page.
Right.
Aside
Assholes.
from like, we're gonna share a few things a day. So
Right.
that's pretty much what it is that people are angry because the Facebook page is going
But
away.
people have been angry the whole entire time over anything and everything that has ever been posted.
That's true. People are angry that we won't post their post, and people are angry that we posted somebody else's post that they don't like. And it's been very intense because the nature of the posts is like people talking about suicide and domestic violence and racism and heavy stuff. And so it means a lot to people. And so
Yeah.
people are like, somebody last night was like, basically implying that people are going to kill themselves if this page doesn't exist.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It's very interesting. And so that is also, I think, a big part of why we wanted to talk about feedback. Is like,
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of feedback from people.
You can tell who came up with the question of the week this week.
Did you
Well, I
learn
mean-
anything that you're going to implement
I
for
think
getting feedback from Halliday?
that the biggest thing that I've learned about, like, it's just not worth it to be a snarky little bitch that I want to be on Facebook.
Mm.
People will copy and paste things that you say and take screenshots of things that you say, and people are gonna look for ways to like
Get you.
This is being a public figure in 2020.
I guess so, yeah.
And you're just like, you're the hardest person I can imagine turning into a villain.
Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah.
I'm very proud of myself for the level of keeping cool that I've done.
Like, I remember early on, like, someone said, the mods have to answer for the rampant transphobia on this page. And then I just saw, like, cute Bryce and Shelsea, like, chilling in a pool in front of your yard, just being, like, the most wholesome human beings in the world. Like, how did it come to this?
Yeah, people are like, you racist, sexist assholes.
Wow.
The transphobic
Wow.
thing was like day 3 too.
Yeah,
I
that
remember that. That was when it started shifting.
Yeah, that's when I would check the page daily, which I'm an awful person.
I think the best wave was the furry wave.
the furry wave was a big deal, yeah.
You're going to have to write a memoir.
Yeah. Somebody just should make the Howling for Furries page.
It's
Yeah,
crazy how like
that's-
the little mini pages that have sparked and like the like non-fascist Hal page.
Yeah.
Wait, what's the go shit in your pants at 8? Isn't that one?
Oh, stay
Oh, that one-
shit in the tub at 8
Oh, I'm gonna join that one.
p.m. Or do a cock-a-doodle
Okay, doing
doo
that
at
one.
8 a.m. is one.
That makes sense.
Go outside and meow at 6 p.m. There's a lot of random.
I mean, it's actually a super interesting case study in like how movements live and die. That like the Occupy movement, it was one thing, and then more people came on, and then it just fractured into oblivion. And of course, like the subterfuge by the government. But on a whole, I'm so happy to have been part of that wave because it was just a case study in Facebook, but just how people interact. And then like all the people are like, this page was created to do X, Y, and Z, and now it's become this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one thing that like we could learn from the Occupy movement is that there wasn't a pivot as growth happened. And I think that that's actually really important. Like, to take an example from the Howling page, like when we had 8,000 people on there, we had open posting and no rules. And that was like acceptable-ish. And now with like 500,000 people, like you just can't keep that same system. And I think the Occupy movement was so committed at its core to being like collectivist decision-making and being anti-structure that it wasn't willing to adjust as it scaled.
Yeah, that's a bless your heart moment. It's like, oh, y'all tried it. You really did want to stay grassroots.
Yeah, they never gave up on, like a lot of people I think in the Occupy movement never slowed down.
Well, we got 5 minutes left before we wrap it up. Do you guys have any more thoughts and feedback, or holla at 8, or we should holla at 8 p.m.?
Chelsea, what do you think is the actual stupidest thing you've ever said?
That's the stupidest thing I've ever said.
You said thousands of people were accusing you of saying the stupidest thing they ever heard.
Oh, no. Today was like, imagine being so incredibly terrible at managing a page. Wow. And I wanted to respond by being like, you should talk to my roommates from Orbis House about how I put dishes in the dishwasher. But I didn't.
Yeah, go ahead and tag Orbis House. That'll get them a lot of love. The legion of pissed off Facebookers.
Oh, that's so funny.
What do you think is the stupidest thing you've ever said?
It's such a good question. But I think I'll have to like sit for like 12 hours and think of everything I've ever said.
Yeah,
come back to us.
Yeah, that's a good question for everyone in the world. What's the stupidest thing you've ever said?
Yeah. And some things just can't be unsaid, like if they're really bad. Mm-hmm.
I could name the stupidest thing I've ever said, but I won't say it on here.
Oh, intrigue.
Yeah.
We can't end with that curiosity. None of us
Yeah.
are asleep.
I know this one.
Oh, I know it.
Is it problematic? Sounds like it
Yeah,
could be
it's,
problematic.
I
it
think
has
I
to
know
do with every time I've ever broken up with a girl, I say this.
it. We're like, yeah.
I feel like I may know one of those. It's like you go back to a random moment and you're just like, huh, that wasn't me.
I wonder if it's always in like a relationship or romantic setting, like the stupidest thing we've ever said.
Yeah,
or just like when I've been high or something.
Or that. Well, I mean, for sure, like the actual stupidest thing I ever had was when I was like 14 and high.
Yeah.
I once broke up with my girlfriend on Christmas Day, which doubled as her birthday.
That's so bad.
That's not stupid. This is evil.
It's just a bad move.
But how awkward would it be if it was her birthday and Christmas and you were hanging out all day and you were just like, I want to break up with her. I want to break up with her.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like she would be able to sense it.
Yeah, but still don't say it, you know?
12:01. So actually.
Yeah. It's all facade.
All right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for coming on and hanging out with us.
We'll end on that.
It was
Yeah,
nice
thank you for having us.
seeing you.
Yeah, thank you. It was lovely to see all of your faces virtually.
Yeah.
I haven't talked with any of you in a long time, so it was great.
Yeah, it's like
Good
an
Zoom hang.
Last time we hung out, you introduced me to Billie Eilish.
I did?
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's cool. I don't even remember that. That's cool. Okay.
That's funny.
Like her?
Yeah, I really like her now.
Okay, cool. Good. Me too.
All right, peeps. Well, have a great rest of your night. Thanks so much for joining us.
All
Bye.
right.
Later.
Danny, you're supposed to hang out with me, so do that at some point.
Thanks for that, Quinn. See you later.